And as we continue our coverage today, I want to bring into the program right now Peter MacKay, of course, a former Conservative minister who knows the Mulroney family well. And Peter, hello, thank you for joining us. And I say that because, of course, your father was in Prime Minister Mulroney's cabinet. I'm wondering what you are feeling right now, where your mind goes to at this news.
Well, obviously, a great deal of sadness. Mr. Mulroney has been present in my life for a very long time. And as you noted, he and my father were very close friends and colleagues in Ottawa. My dad stepped down in 1983 to create a by-election that would allow Mr. Mulroney to enter the House of Commons for the first time as a member of Parliament from Central Nova. And he had close ties and connections to this part of the world, having gone to St. Francis Xavier University, and really cut his teeth on politics, arguably, in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada, later at St. Thomas University in New Brunswick. And so there's a great sense of loss, Michael. There will be a lot of words spoken, a lot of celebration and tributes to his life. For me, he was a mentor. He was somebody who, was larger than life in many ways. And I observed him from a distance, obviously, through his political career, but got to know him quite well and personally over the years. And he was somebody who I very often relied on for good advice, personal and professional, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and there was, and we were noting it before you joined the program, Peter, this affability about the man. I will say that I worked with Ben Mulroney at CTV many years back, and had a very, of course, Ben loves his father and was always impressed by how loyal his children were to him. It says something about Brian Mulroney as a father to his kids. But beyond that, through the years, I've had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Mulroney. Always very kind, always very polite. I saw him treat everyone so well, regardless of station in life, retaining facts that few people are able to do. When you think about that side of Brian Mulroney, I'm wondering what you think about this special character that he brought to the job of politics, because it is not an easy life to pursue.
No, and Mr. Mulroney had a gift when it came to his retention of names and places and faces, and that was something that served him well. You mentioned his family. I got to know them again when I was very young, when he was here in 1983, and Caroline, Mark, Ben, Nicholas, and their grandchildren were the pride of his life. He reveled in that and often reminded me of the importance to never lose that connectivity and the importance of keeping your family close and your friends. And he was somebody who had great loyalty, a person who, as you mentioned, was extremely personable. The people who served with him in cabinet, who served with him later in life in different positions that he held, he would call them up and at good times and bad times, the birth of children, the loss of people that were close to them. He had this incredible ability to reach out and had a massive network and following right to this day. And so, his loss, his family's loss, is something that is touching a lot of people beyond just the politician and the former prime minister. He was a larger than life figure for many, and certainly we are feeling it here in our household and here in Nova Scotia.
Peter, I want to bring into this discussion someone you know rather well, Julie Van Dusen. She's been joining us as we do this coverage, and of course someone who covered not only your dad, but of course the former Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney. And Julie, I know you have a question for Peter.
Well, Peter, I was just wondering about the big picture. Brian Mulroney, of course, is an icon in the progressive conservative movement. And I'm just wondering, as you absorb his passing, what does that mean for the progressive conservative movement?
Well, the progressive conservative movement is alive and well. Mr. Mulroney was Canada's greenest prime minister. Mm-hmm. He was somebody who obviously reflected his own life and upbringing and showed tremendous compassion and leadership on so many different files. Yes, free trade, of course, he'll be remembered for the GST, the economy, all of that. But he also had a very important social conscience, which is, I think, in the DNA of the Progressive Conservative Party and the Conservative Party. And I say answer to that question, Julie, he was somebody who I consulted with, of course, when we reunified the conservative movement. He was a person who really believed in the necessity of having a national pan-Canadian conservative alternative. And he was also somebody who continued to influence Mr. Harper and subsequent leaders of the Conservative Party. They would all go and spend time with him and discuss sometimes very complex, difficult issues of which he always had an opinion.
And also, we talked a little bit about his generosity. He certainly also had a relationship with the current Prime Minister. And when this country was facing Donald Trump questioning the North American Free Trade Agreement, Brian Mulroney was in conversation with this current Prime Minister, with Justin Trudeau. How do you think that fits into the legacy and how Brian Mulroney might be remembered, Peter?
Well, it speaks to an important lesson for all leaders of this country, and that is the importance of engagement at the highest level with our allies. And Mr. Mulroney, I've heard him say, after the safety and security and economic well-being of Canadians, one of the most important files on a Prime Minister's desk is the relationship with the President of the United States. And so you're right to point out, Michael, that he was in contact with Mr. Trudeau during that tumultuous period of time. He was also in touch with Mr. Trump. He had that ability. Let's not forget, he eulogized both Mr. Reagan, former President Reagan, and former Prime Minister Bush, or President Bush. He was somebody who was admired and respected and was listened to by world leaders, even after he left office.
I'm going to ask you to reach back a little bit, Peter. I'm wondering, because your own path, of course, you saw your father in politics, you knew Brian Mulroney. I'm wondering what your first impressions were of him as a child, as a young man, that perhaps inspired your own path to follow your dad and also Mr. Mulroney.
Well, Michael, to be very honest with you, I did not intend to follow my father or Mr. Mulroney into politics. That was really not in the cards. It wasn't until quite late in life, I suppose, by some political measurements. It was Jean Charest who served in Mr. Mulroney's cabinet that was perhaps the most influential in terms of entering politics. But certainly how Mr. Mulroney styled himself, how he kept in contact with people, how he, really, in spite of what some might have thought of him, kept the common touch. I'm reminded of the old Rudyard Kipling poem, If. He could talk with crowds and walk with kings nor lose the common touch. He was somebody who really, throughout his life, never forgot his humble beginnings in Baie-Comeau, driving a truck at a pulp mill. He was somebody who really did empathize with the struggle of Canadians. And that is something that helped shape some of my own decisions and how I would certainly like to think that I conducted myself in office, is that you have to stay in touch with people, stay humble, stay where your roots are, and work very hard. He was an extremely hard-working Prime Minister, politician, Canadian, that put in long hours, that listened, that, quite frankly, wasn't afraid to sometimes admit that he'd made mistakes, as all politicians do.
Peter, it has been a whirlwind of an evening with the news that just broke a little bit more than 2 hours ago, just about 2 hours ago. So really appreciate you coming on to the program tonight to speak to us about Brian Mulroney. Peter MacKay, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Julie.